The last time I used a 486 PC was in 1995. That fall, I entered my freshman year of college with a Pentium 120 that I built over the summer and never looked back. Not long ago, I came across this machine made by Leading Edge, a brand I've not heard of before. Today, I thought we'd take a look at this early 90s PC, see what makes it tick, and perform some strategic upgrades. So come join me as I rediscover the secrets of the 486 and relearn what I've forgotten over the last 30 years. Right now, here on Retro Bits. Leading Edge Products was founded in 1980 by brothers and serial entrepreneurs Thomas and Michael Shane. Initially selling wigs from the trunk of a car in Boston, the two later founded an apparel company called Faded Glory Jeans. Their next venture saw them enter the computer accessories market, having secured distribution rights for a line of printers and floppy disks. Does anyone remember this ad? Or how about this one? Their first entry into the home computer market was in 1982, with an 8088 clone offered at half the price of an IBM PC. The company included a best-in-class 6-month warranty to ease buyers' fears of purchasing an unknown brand. Consumer Reports wrote favorably of the system, which also helped them gain recognition. Further, systems were sold as complete packages, including monitors, and even featured the brand's own word processing software. Leading Edge had become a success and followed up their initial effort with the new Model D. Grossing nearly $500 million over a 5-year period, Michael gained the reputation as the king of clones. Success was short-lived, however. Blaming suppliers, the company failed to make delivery to retailers who had paid in advance, and the business collapsed, with the company owing tens of millions to creditors. In 1989, the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy and were acquired by Daewoo. The new owners turned the brand around and divested of it in 1995. By 1997, sales under the new Swiss owners had tanked and the company was dissolved. For his part, Shane is quoted as having said, "I made more mistakes than anybody who has ever started a business, and I haven't been a good businessman, it's true." Nonetheless, he went on to work on many other ventures, most recently founding health company Leading Edge Global in 2024. And here it is, my Leading Edge 486 that I picked up from a Craigslist seller locally maybe a year or two ago. We've got the Leading Edge logo here, as well as a color-matched power button in blue, and the Leading Edge logo here on the keyboard as well. All in all, I think this is a pretty good-looking machine. Maybe it's not as iconic as a Gateway 2000, but it's nice that they have their own design language with their vertical stripes here, which they carried across machines from multiple generations. We're not going to have a cleaning montage today because I've already taken care of that off camera. Here on the front panel we have the key lock, which was pretty standard for machines of this era. We've got the power and hard drive activity LED, reset button, and the power switch. Conspicuously absent is a turbo button or a 7-segment speed indicator. I found this ad in an issue of PC World from 1993, and it's definitely the right case, if not exactly the same model. Even the floppy drive is the same, so this one must be the original part, unlike the CD-ROM and Gotek here. This system is a CPC 2008, or maybe a 2004, and there's almost nothing on the internet about this model except for a Vogons post that I started and a RetroWeb entry that was added sometime thereafter. In archive.org's entire library of old computer magazines, the model number is only ever mentioned once. Here it is, a single line in an upgrade guide from Computer Shopper, March of 1993. It's almost as if this machine barely even existed. Here on the inside, we have what looks to be a pretty standard AT form factor machine. One thing that's interesting is that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and there's an 8th in there, 16-bit ISO slots. There's no VESA Bus or PCI, both of which had been introduced by the time this machine launched. It's no surprise that the motherboard is manufactured by Daewoo. Leading Edge had been using them as a supplier since they introduced the Model D in 1985, but by the time this machine was released, the company had gone bankrupt and had been acquired by the Korean conglomerate. When I first got the machine, the Varta battery had already been removed, but I cleaned and repaired the damage to the motherboard. We'll replace this with something suitable a little bit later. And right here we've got the heart of the system, a 486DX33 CPU, along with a 50 MHz crystal oscillator. Now I'm not sure how the system is going to derive the 33 MHz clock from a 50 MHz crystal, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, I guess. So this is interesting. This ad is the only one I found for the system, and it states that the machine could be configured with a local bus socket and a DX266 processor. I guess what I have is either an early or low-spec model. I wasn't able to find any documentation on the system, but a forum member on Vogons helped me locate this datasheet. Dash Computer, I haven't heard of them, but maybe it's a reseller that used the same Daewoo part. According to this, the CPU speed can either be the oscillator frequency or half of that, so 50 or 25 MHz. If this is correct, there's no way to run that processor at 33 without changing the crystal. Maybe someone tried to upgrade the CPU in the past, but didn't finish the job. All right, let's take a look at what cards are installed in this machine. So what we have here is an Aztech AT6800W, and from what I can find on the internet, and there's not that much, this is a SoundBlaster Pro compatible card, and it also has a modem built in here. So SoundBlaster Pro falls right between the original 8-bit SoundBlaster that was mono and the stereo SoundBlaster 16. What is interesting about this card is it has this Aztech AZ2320 chip, and if you see here, it's got that OPL logo right there, which means this is an officially Yamaha licensed OPL3 chip. So this will give us stereo OPL3, which is basically like a SoundBlaster Pro 2 or the SoundBlaster 16 in stereo, but this card should only be able to produce 44 kHz digital playback in mono, like the SoundBlaster Pro. It also has a wavetable header here, and a joystick game port here with MPU 401 mode, not intelligent mode though. Anyway, pretty much like a SoundBlaster Pro 2 with a modem. Next up, we have this Gamecard 3 automatic from CH Products, copyright 1990. And what it is an expansion card with 2 more game ports on it. That's kind of strange. I do not remember playing any PC games that supported 2 joysticks. Maybe I just missed out on that, but that just doesn't seem like something I ever ran into. You know, maybe, I remember CH Products, they made some like flight simulator hardware, so maybe some of their flight sticks or control yokes or something used 2 game ports at the same time. I really don't remember. If you know what this was used for or what used 2 joysticks, either software or hardware, let me know in the comments, but I don't know of any. And so I'm going to leave this card out of the machine because I have absolutely no use case for it. What we've got here is a Trident VGA card, and these things were absolutely everywhere back in the day. I'm sure I had 1 or 2, but I don't remember which models. This one here is based on the TVGA 8900C chipset, which is one of their faster options for their 16-bit ISA line of cards. It looks like it's got 512K of RAM, expandable up to a full megabyte here, and it's got a 40 MHz RAM DAC clock, which unfortunately is the slower of the 2 options offered for this chipset. Finally, we've got the Jace Super I/O card here, and basically AT-style machines like this had a keyboard connector on board and no other I/O on the motherboard, so they relied on cards like this to provide all the additional I/O for the system. So we've got the floppy connector, IDE, 2 serial ports, and a parallel port here, all provided by this card. And what's interesting is this is integral to the system. It's tied in with the chipset and BIOS, and it's software configurable through the BIOS setup screen. So this card would have come with the system and is more or less inseparable from it. So there we go. We can now see all 8 of those 16-bit ISA slots here. We also have 8 SIM slots that are all fully populated, and the system has an Opti chipset. Now, I wasn't able to find a manufacturing date anywhere on the machine. However, many of the chips have a late 1992 build date on them, so I'm guessing this machine was from the tail end of that year or later, which does line up with that magazine ad we saw from March of 1993. All right, it's time to test this thing out, and I want to set it up like a period-correct 90s home computer, starting with the 15-inch CRT. Next, let's add these genuine SoundBlaster branded stereo speakers. They've got a gold-plated plug. Oh yeah, I am sure these are going to sound amazing. Now that's pretty good, but I still feel like something's missing. There we go, now we're talking. 90s achieved. And there we go, leading edge 486 personal computer, model 2000. Is it a 2000, a 2004, or a CPC 2008? This machine seems to have a bit of an identity crisis. And no surprise here, we've got an invalid configuration because there is no battery, so we need to run the setup utility. And here we are in the Phoenix setup utility version 1.0 from 1990. Now that's interesting. This is a machine from 1993, but it's got a BIOS and setup program from 1990. Let's just skip over the date here. We will need to add our second disk drive. There we go. And for our hard drive, this is interesting. The machine does not have any hard drive auto detection. Now, I've had earlier 386 machines from years before this one that had hard drive auto detection. I'm not sure why this 486 doesn't have that feature. Maybe because the BIOS is so early from 1990, but even still, that's really weird on a 486 not to have hard drive auto detection. Now I know the hard drive is type 36 because it's written on the computer case. So we'll set the hard drive up there and hit escape and F4 to save and exit. And after the reboot, it's come back up with another configuration problem, and that's because it doesn't automatically detect the amount of extended memory in the configuration program. So we need to go in here, and after one reboot, it now has entered that value for us. So we just need to save it one more time, and now we should be good. Now, what's interesting is once the machine reboots, I've tried every single key combination to get back into the BIOS setup. I've tried all of the F keys, escape, backspace, delete, and none of them got me back into the setup. As it turns out, after a bit of Googling, I found that the magic combination to get back into the BIOS setup is Alt-Control-S when the machine is already booted. So you don't do it when you're booting the machine, you do it after it's already come up. So that's just an interesting thing. I've never seen that before on any 386 or 486 PC that I've had. Here we are in the system information utility. I just want to take a look at the CPU speed here. Yep, and there we go. We have a 486 at 25 megahertz. So as I thought, even though there's a 33 megahertz processor in here, because of the crystal oscillator being a 50 megahertz unit, we can't run this thing at 33. It is running at 25. Now what's interesting is this computer is running at a speed well below that of a 386-33, which shouldn't be the case for a 486 processor. Here's Tyrian 2000, a game that the previous owner installed on the hard drive, and look at this, it is completely unplayable. This game should work just fine on a 486 class machine, so something is really wrong here. Okay, here we are in the BIOS setup screen again, and I'm going to go to the second page. And if you notice down here, cache control is disabled by default. This turns off the system's L2 cache even though it has 64K on board. So let's change that to enabled and try again. And here we are again in the system information benchmarks, and you can now see that this computer is much faster than the 386 at 33 megahertz and way faster than the 286 at 8 megahertz that it was about the same speed as before. That just goes to show how important L2 cache is for a 486 or really any machine with a modern architecture. And once again, just to prove the point, here we are back in Tyrian 2000, and yep, the game runs just fine, like it should on a 486, now that we have the cache turned on. Next, I want to run some video performance benchmarks. So here we are in the Check It utility. I'm going to go over here and run the video benchmarks. And we have two benchmarks that are being run, BIOS video characters per second and direct video characters per second. And we can see that our machine is 2.61 times faster than a PCXT when using BIOS calls to the video card. And when we're directly writing to the video card, we can see it's 31.15 times faster than a PCXT. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save these values, and we're just going to call this the default settings. And now I'm going to enter the BIOS setup because I think we can improve these numbers. If we go to page 2 here, we can see there are a couple more options, including BIOS shadow, which we're going to turn on, and video shadow, which we're going to turn on. Now, what these do is they copy the BIOS ROM and the video card ROM into system memory. The EPROMs are much slower than system RAM, and so by making a copy of these, we will improve the performance of anything that uses the calls to the routines in those ROMs. This is a pretty standard feature for these machines, but it was turned off by default. So let's write these settings and see what happens. Okay, we're back in Check It. Now let's rerun those video benchmarks. And now I want to compare them to what we previously saved. And there we go. We can see now that the current settings are much faster than the previous benchmark that we took, especially when we're looking at the BIOS video characters per second, when calls are made against system RAM instead of the EPROM on the video card. Direct video hasn't changed very much, but we weren't expecting it to. Let me save these off. We're going to call this one Shadow, I guess. That seems reasonable, if I can spell it right. There we go. And I think we can get this to go even faster. So let me re-enter the BIOS settings. And on page 2 here, we've got this I/O speed here, which controls the speed of the ISA bus, which is supposed to be around 8 megahertz. Now, clock I is the system clock, so 25 megahertz, divided by 4, which is going to give us 6.25 megahertz. That's slower than the ISA bus should be running at. So let's look at the other options here. Clock I over 3 should be 8.3 megahertz, which is close to the speed of the ISA bus, what it should be. So let's save that and retest. And once again, let's rerun those video benchmarks and compare them to the previous settings. Okay, not a lot of difference, but we are 1 bar faster, 1.01 times faster than the previous setting with the ISA bus speed turned up a notch. Let's turn it up one more time and see if we can't get a little bit more performance by overclocking the bus. So let's save these settings. We're going to call this 8 megahertz. Go back into our BIOS, and we're going to change this one more time to clock 2i over 5, which is the 50 megahertz clock divided by 5, which will give us 10 megahertz. Now that's faster than the ISA bus was designed for, and it may cause some instability with some cards, but we won't know until we try. So let's find out. And once again, we'll rerun the benchmarks and compare it to our last settings. So at 10 megahertz, we don't see any performance changes here. It doesn't look like that's going to make any difference. We've pretty much extracted the most performance we're going to get out of the system with simple configuration changes. And we may have introduced some incompatibility with certain ISA cards by running the bus at 10 megahertz, so we may have to turn that speed back down. But for now, I'm going to leave it the way it is, and we'll move on. You've already heard me banging away on this thing, so I figured we should take a quick look at the matching keyboard. It did come with the system, which is really nice, unlike the matching monitor. It's also a bit yellowed, but then again, so is the computer, so no big deal. On the back side here, we can see that we've got the model number EAT1010, and it's manufactured by Seijin, which is another Korean company, and I believe they sold this exact same model under their own brand, so this is just a rebranded keyboard. It has the legs and feet are still intact, and there is a sticker here covering up a little recess that could be a switch on a different model, perhaps. Now the keyboard itself, a little plasticky sounding, but it's actually quite nice to type on. The action is really good. It doesn't feel like it's a cheap rubber dome keyboard. So just for good measure, let's pop off some of these keycaps and see what we're dealing with here. From what I can tell, these are Futaba MA41 mechanical switches. So we're dealing with a fully mechanical keyboard here. And from what I've learned, because of their design, they are clickier on the upstroke than the downstroke. Let's give a listen. That's pretty cool. So how do you feel about a little keyboard ASMR? Before we put this thing through its paces, I'm just going to run a quick diagnostic on the hard drive with check disk here. And as we saw before in the BIOS, we have about 100 megabytes on this IDE hard drive, and there's only about 3 megabytes free. And that is totally the authentic 90s experience. We were always running out of space, and we were always having to delete something just to make room for one more program. The struggle was real. Something else interesting is that the version of Windows 3.1 that was installed here is a Packard Bell branded version of Windows, and it's got some driver errors here. Ta-da! Otherwise, it looks like a pretty generic install of Windows. There's also this tutorial directory, which also is a Packard Bell branded getting started with your computer. So clearly a disk image from a Packard Bell was installed on this machine at some point in the past. I did find disk images on archive.org for leading edge versions of DOS and Windows, so maybe I'll reinstall with one of those later. Now in terms of performance, this 25 megahertz system runs Wolf 3D really, really well. I'm rubbish with the keyboard here, but it plays just fine. Doom, on the other hand, not so playable. It's very laggy and very janky on this 25 megahertz processor. You could play it, but you probably wouldn't want to. I remember playing this game on a Pentium 120, so maybe we're asking a little too much from a 25 megahertz 486 here. Yeah, this is basically unplayable. Well, it should be easy enough to upgrade this thing. We already saw that the motherboard can support up to a DX50 processor. What do you think? Should we upgrade this thing? Yeah, I think we should. And through the power of YouTube, I now have the motherboard removed so we can take a closer look at it. First of all, we have the 486 DX33 CPU once again, and here is a socket for a math coprocessor if you have the 46SX processor instead. Over here we have what looks to be the footprint for a VISA local bus slot. Now, I'm curious if it's possible to solder in my own slot here and then have VISA local bus on this motherboard, or if the chipset itself doesn't support it. So that's something I'm going to look into because it would make a good upgrade for a future project. Now, in terms of the DX50 CPU, this motherboard does support it, we just have to change some jumpers, but those CPUs have historically been associated with instability problems due to the front-side bus speed required to run them. That 50 MHz bus does require 20 nanosecond or faster cache RAM, and this motherboard does have 20 nanosecond L2 cache here. It's got 64K of it, upgradable to a full 256K, so that may be another project for the future as well. Now, those DX50 processors are a little less common and they are more expensive, so I ended up buying this DX250 instead. This will let me run the machine at the 25 MHz front-side bus and it's clock doubled internally. It is a little gross because of the adhesive from the old heatsink and fan here, so I'm going to get these cleaned up and then we can install them. And there we go. Now, that was a bit of an ordeal, but with some IPA, a razor blade, and some elbow grease, we got there in the end. Now, an active cooler isn't 100% necessary, but a heatsink is a good idea at the very least for these clock-doubled CPUs. But there isn't enough space between the CPU socket and the CD-ROM drive for a heatsink or a fan. So it looks like I'm going to have to shuffle some things around, and I think I'm going to take out this Gotek while I'm at it because I want a real 3.5-inch drive. Now, I hate to take out this original 5.25-inch drive, but I think if I installed this combined unit, that would free up a lot of space. I'll try this for now, and I can always switch things around later if I want. I'm starting to think I might need to retro-bright this plastic as well. I don't have the proper CPU removal tool for this. Have you seen the prices on those things lately? I think they used to be given away free with certain CPU upgrades, but nowadays they're impossible to get your hands on. So I'm going to use one of these car panel removal tools here. It's plastic and it's soft, and as long as I don't bend the pins, it should be okay. And now that I've got it started, I have one of these automotive panel clip removal tools, and I think this will do the trick. If I can just sneak it in here, and give it a little squeeze. And there we go. Now, that worked for me, but I don't recommend you try that at home. Your mileage may vary. Make sure when installing the new CPU that the little dot here lines up with the indentation in the silkscreen. And there we go. We shouldn't even need to change any of the jumpers on the motherboard because the CPU is operating at the same 25 MHz bus speed as the other one. I'm going to put some thermal tape on here. This is double-sided thermal tape designed for heat sinks. Stick that on like there. Peel off the top and install the fan. I've put the motherboard back inside the case just to test the fitment, and without the CD-ROM drive here, we have absolutely tons of space, so we should be good to go. But we're not done yet. The battery leak damaged some of the traces here and here, so I've cleaned everything up to the best of my ability and applied UV curing solder mask to prevent any future corrosion, and of course the motherboard works fine, so I don't think we need to repair anything. However, this through-hole did get damaged by the leak, and it will be hard to install a CR battery adapter with the diode to prevent it from charging. Fortunately, we have this J10 footprint here, and according to the manual, this is for an external battery. So I should be able to solder in a pin header here, and that will allow me to hook up an external battery pack with a regular battery that won't be charged by the motherboard, so we won't lose our BIOS and clock settings every time we power off the machine. Before I solder anything in, I'll just need to know which pin is which, and this one is labeled number 1, so it should be +V here, so I'm guessing pin 4 should be ground. And it is, and pin 3 should also be ground. Yep, so I know which pins are which, and now I can wire up the battery pack. And once again, through the power of YouTube, I've installed the pin header here, and I've also crimped up this battery pack, and it's got 3 AAAs, so it should give me 4.5 volts, and if you can see there, I've keyed pin 2, so it should be impossible to install this the wrong way. All I need to do now is trim pin 2 off of the motherboard, There we go. And now this should install just like that. Very nice. All right, we're still not done because we really need to do something about this crummy old BIOS. Enter Microid Research, a company that developed and sold replacement BIOS chips for PCs of the era. Their products provided enhanced features and improved performance for older systems, including things like support for larger hard drives and faster CPUs. The upgrades weren't cheap, starting at around $100, but the investment could potentially save one from having to buy a whole new computer or motherboard in certain cases. MR BIOS upgrades were available for nearly 500 different motherboard and chipset variations across a wide range of OEM manufacturers. Just for systems with an Opti chipset alone, there are so many to choose from. Even the 82C493 chipset in my system has over a dozen permutations for different turbo and cache configurations. I'm going to grab the one that supports the Super I/O card here and burn it to an EEPROM. I'm just going to go ahead and remove the old chip here. This EEPROM is the exact same 64 kilobyte chip that I've used on the Versa 64 card and the Coco EEPROM pack, so I had a few leftovers on hand. And there we go. The last thing I want to take care of is this 100 megabyte internal IDE drive. Now, it works perfectly fine, and I'm going to leave it in the system for historical purposes, but it's just too small for what I want to do with this machine. So I'm going to install this compact Flash-to-IDE adapter in its place. Now, this will allow me to move stuff back and forth between my main PC really easily, and it will also give me all the space that I need on this 486 class machine. Now, I would love to mount this in the back of the machine in one of the empty slots, but because there's only one IDE channel, I need to reach both the CD-ROM and the hard drive with a single cable, so there's just not enough room. I may be able to mount this in the front panel somewhere if I can build a custom bracket, but for now, I'm just going to tuck it away inside the machine. Here's what I've come up with as a temporary solution. The CF card adapter is mounted here to the top of the power supply with some ESD foam, and it's good and secure. It's not going anywhere. And that's about as far as I can get it from the CD-ROM, given the length of the cable that I have. I've also mounted the battery pack here under the power supply, so I think we're ready to put this all back together. So there we go. We've got our new processor, BIOS, battery, and compact flash adapter installed, so I think it's time to test this thing out. You may have noticed that the floppy drive is different than before. That's because when I powered up the machine for the first time, it made a terrible noise, so I shut it back down, and this is what I found. If you look in there really closely, you might be able to see that this is the remnants of a rubber belt. I am surprised that they still used a belt on this drive, but maybe they had to do it because there wasn't enough room for a direct drive motor in this tight packaging here. Haha, that's awesome. I can't believe it worked on the first try. I've never upgraded a PC BIOS before. Somehow I thought it would be more complicated than that. But there we go, 1994, Microid Research. So this BIOS is now newer than the computer and 4 years older than the BIOS that came with it. We've got our 46DX2 there running at 50 megahertz, clock doubled, so that's working. We've got our built-in math coprocessor, our cache RAM was detected, our memory was detected, and yeah, everything looks good here. Let's just page through the settings and see what else there is to see. We have energy management, which wasn't present in the old BIOS. I'm not going to bother to set the clock. Got to set our floppy configurations here. Let's see. That looks right. Okay. And now onto the fixed disks. If we type question mark here, we have auto setup. And look at that, it detected the compact flash automatically. So this is exactly what I wanted out of the MR BIOS upgrade, so I wouldn't have to manually key in the hard drive geometry every time. So that's great. And here we've got our serial and parallel ports. So this is on the Super I/O card. So I think I selected the correct BIOS image to work with the card that we've got because it detected the 2 serial and 1 parallel port. So that's pretty cool. And the Cache is turned on by default, which is something we didn't see in the previous BIOS. And we've got the system BIOS and video BIOS being shadowed automatically. Again, these were defaulted to off in the old BIOS settings. And we've got some DMA settings which weren't present before. So all in all, it looks like this is a pretty comprehensive and excellent upgrade for our system. Let's hit F10 and record the settings. Hey, and there we go. And I've set up a MS-DOS 622 startup menu in my config sys and AutoExec bat, just so that I have a few different options for different programs we want to run. I can do all this on the CF card outside of the machine because it works fine on my modern PC. Here we are in Check It once again. Let's compare the performance of this machine to the previous processor that we had. And I'm just going to go over to the main system benchmarks here. Haha, I love that. Maximum performance level reached. Yes, that's exactly what we want. And there we go. We are now 69.2 times faster than a PC XT. Nice. Let's compare this to the previous 486 DX25 that came in the system. And you can see that the lines go right off the screen, but we are in fact 2 times faster than the previous processor. So our DX250, clock doubled, is working perfectly. And that is a nice little drop-in upgrade. It really did double the computational performance for $30, including shipping. So I think that was a really worthwhile upgrade. Let's go check the video performance just for good measure. Maximum performance level reached. All right, 40.48 times faster with the BIOS and 63 times faster with direct video. Let's compare that to the previous settings on the 25 megahertz processor. And wow, it's 1.9 and almost 2 times faster than the old processor. I was not expecting that to happen. I'm surprised the video performance went up so much because I didn't think CPS was a bottleneck due to the CPU. But yeah, with these upgrades, this should be a really nice system for DOS gaming and demos. Here we are again in the System Information tool, and I've got the CPU benchmark running, and you can see this computer is now measuring a benchmark of 108.1 relative to a 386 and a 286 and an XT here. One neat thing about the MR BIOS is that it has this capability of enabling and disabling the system turbo even on machines that don't have a turbo button. So all we have to do is press Control, Alt, and minus, and that will slow the computer right down. So now you can see it's running at 29.0 speed index relative to these other machines, and we can turn the speed right back up, back to its full speed. So that'll be awesome if we want to run some older DOS software that requires a slower CPU, even though we don't have a turbo button on this machine. All right, let's retest Doom on this upgraded CPU. Yeah, already we can tell it's much better than before. It's much smoother and the controls are much more responsive. It isn't perfect, but it's not bad either. It's totally playable. Of course, the Trident card in this machine isn't the fastest video card out there. The Seng ET4000 I had growing up was a lot faster. Still, the ISA bus really is the limitation here. Things started to get a lot faster with the introduction of Visa Local and PCI. Hey, this is actually somewhat playable now. Before, the frame rate was so bad I couldn't even aim, but it's doable now. Of course, the P120 I played this on back in the day was still much more powerful. Even setting aside the huge difference in clock speed, the Pentium had major architectural improvements over the 486 as well. It is playable and you can still enjoy it, but this is kind of on the extreme end of what this machine is going to be capable of. God, I love this game. I remember playing it back in my college dorm over a 50-foot null modem cable. The controls actually respond now. I'm getting more than 1 frame a second as well. I do have all the settings on max, so it should be perfectly playable if I dial things back a bit. Yeah, I don't know why I keep showing Pentium-era games on this 486 PC. I think we should look at something more age-appropriate for the system. Since the first one was bad, let's make sure that both of our floppy drives are working. Yeah, see, this is way more appropriate for a 486, and look how smoothly it scrolls. I absolutely love the tracker music on these epic games as well. And now for the other drive. This is the first time I've installed this from floppy since the early 90s. So Wing Commander 2 is one of those games that just wasn't meant for a machine this fast, and it won't run properly at this speed. Fortunately, we have a solution to that with our software turbo selection through the MR BIOS. All I need to do is hit Control, Alt, and minus, and then relaunch the game. And now it's running at the proper speed. Such a classic game. I absolutely love the music in this. It does sound a bit different than I remember it though. I must have been playing it on an OPL2 sound card back in the day.
I will speak with Prince Dracath alone. Guards, you are dismissed.
I guess we should try the CD-ROM drive out since it came with the machine. What's neat is this is a 4-disc changer.
Max, where should I put this so it doesn't hurt anyone we know or care about?
Out the window, Sam. There's nothing but strangers out there.
I hope there was nobody on that bus.
Nobody we know, at least.
This is the perfect machine for playing point-and-click adventures like the ones from Sierra and LucasArts, including the later multimedia releases like Sam & Max here.
Hello? Yes? 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 No? Really? Well, the same to you, Mac.
Another confused census taker?
Actually, it was the commissioner with another idiotic and baffling assignment.
Does it involve wanton destruction?
We can only hope.
I wanted to install and try out this PicoGUS that I picked up at VCF last fall, but I think we're out of time for today. I think this is interesting enough to warrant a whole episode on its own, so let me know if that's something you'd like to see. In the meantime, here's a little teaser. Well, that was a fun adventure. I'm really happy with how this machine turned out, and I got to relearn a bunch of things I had forgotten or never knew in the first place. This will be a great system for DOS gaming, playing demos, and listening to tracker music. I did spend a lot of time behind the scenes changing jumpers, fiddling with IRQs and DMAs, you know, exactly the same shared trauma we all went through those many years ago. I do think it's important to remember where we came from and how those experiences shaped us into the people we are today, so thank you 486 PCs. You may be gone, but your legacy lives on. So there we have it. While the brand did sell a decent number of machines, its name has been all but forgotten, relegated to not much more than a footnote in history. Did you ever use a leading edge computer? Let us know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this bit. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Retro Bits.